Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole. I'm the community manager at Moneymentals, which is an online personal finance course designed and perfected and led by certified financial planner Michael Goldman, who's
Woohoo! Hi,
here. Yeah.
guys.
and The Moneymentals is a really great course for anyone you know that has gone through a recent life change, whether it's that they're going to college or they're graduating from college or they're getting married or they're starting a family, anything like that. I would say is a great time to look at finances and make a plan. So check out moneymentals.com if you want to learn more about that. But for today, Michael is going to answer some of personal finance questions people have. Are you ready for today's question, Michael?
We'll find out whether I'm ready or not.
All right. I think you're ready for anything. I'm sure you pretty much heard everything in your practice.
We'll find out. We'll find out. I've definitely heard quite a bit.
That's what I would say. Okay. Hi, Michael. My friend just got her real estate license and she keeps trying to convince me to buy a house. I get that the banks will lend me way more money than I probably should have access to, but how do I know if I can actually afford a house? Thanks.
That's a great question. The first thing I always tell people about that are thinking about buying a house is this the right time? So whether you can afford it or not, it may not be the right time for you. So, generally speaking, if you're not planning to stay where you are for at least 5 to 7 years, you probably should rent rather than buy. And a lot of the reason for that is there's just a certain amount of cost in purchasing and selling a home, including the brokerage fee, that there's no way you're going to make that money back in appreciation in the value of the property if the time is too short, or it's unlikely.
Yeah.
So the first thing is, is this even the right time for me? And also, if you're expecting a significant life change in the near future, like you're about to get married or you're about to start a family, what you want right now may change significantly in just a couple years. And so it's a shame to buy something and then, 2 or 3 years later go, this really just doesn't serve my needs anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So think about first whether it's the right time. And then if it's the right time and place for you and you're interested in it, what you really have to look at is the whole cost of owning a house or a home, whether it's a condo. It's not just the mortgage, okay? So
Good point.
It starts with the mortgage, okay? So and there's lots of calculators online where you can kind of figure out about how much the payment for the mortgage would be if you buy a house that's X number of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
You usually want to figure also that to get the best terms on a mortgage, you're going to want to be able to put down about 20% of the purchase price. There are loans where you can put down less than 20%, but you usually end up having to pay additional fees in the form of private mortgage insurance.
Yeah.
So if you can, you'd ideally like to put 20% down, which means you got to save that amount of money up. Do you even have that down payment?
Yeah.
So if you're buying, for example, a $300,000 home, 20% is $60,000. Do you have $60,000?
I wish.
And you may need to save for a while before you're ready to take that step. Then there's the actual cost of the mortgage. If you put less than 20% down, there's additional costs in the what's called private mortgage insurance. You need to think about you're going to have insurance on the house. You're going to have to pay property taxes on the house. You also need to think about all the maintenance costs, and a lot of times people forget about that. How's the lawn getting mowed? How's the driveway getting plowed if you live up in Maine like me?
Yeah.
How about when things break? How's that getting paid for? You need to be setting aside money every month just to accumulate a reserve for when that happens, and it will. Things break. It's just how it is.
Yeah, it's true.
So you kind of have to take all of that into consideration and say, okay, do I have enough excess income coming in that I can pay the mortgage, pay my property taxes, pay the insurance, and be putting aside money for all the extra maintenance that I need to think about.
Yeah.
If it's your first home too, you should really include in your budget all the stuff that you end up buying for a first home.
That's true.
Even if you're going to mow your own lawn, guess what? You're going to have to buy that lawnmower. Those rooms probably
you probably don't have 4 bedrooms worth of furniture or whatever.
No, all that stuff.
You've been in an apartment, yeah.
So you know, kind of putting at least some furnishing and startup cost in your budget too. So a lot of it's thinking about all of those things that people often forget about. It's not just the mortgage payment. And a lot of times what people get told in terms of what they can afford on the house is how much banks will give them in terms of maximum payment. Well, if you pay your maximum mortgage payment and you're maxed out from just paying that, you're not going to be able to cover all the other costs, and you're going to be house poor.
Yeah, you're going to be eating like your ramen noodles
exactly
on your one chair that's in the middle of your living room.
The other thing I always like to point out to people is there's this whole American dream mythos around, you know, owning a home, and this kind of misconception that you're kind of throwing money away if you're you know, renting. And I really think that's a disservice to perpetuate that. There's nothing wrong with renting. And even though people say, oh, you know, well, if you own your home, you're building equity. Well, guess what? If you take out a 30-year mortgage, the first 15 years of it is mostly interest. You're building this much equity in those first number of years compared to mostly just paying the interest. So you can think of the interest as like rent. You're renting it from the bank instead of renting it from a landlord. And so you're not really building that much equity, especially if you don't plan to keep the house for, you know, that long. If you're going to, you know, move in 5 or 6 or 7 years, you mostly paid interest, and then you paid brokerage fees when you sold the house, and then you turned around and did it again. So there's nothing wrong with renting. And sometimes, truthfully, cash flow wise, it's the smart thing to do.
Well, great. Well, thanks, Michael. Appreciate your answer.